Hello there. I didn't adjust quite the way I wanted it to before I started recording. Being a WYSIWYG kind of guy, I decided not to start over. What you see is what you get with me. This is going to be a sipping and talking video, and we have Bulleit. This is an interesting name. Long before I ever started drinking bourbon, I was running, depending on the day, either the self-checkout or the tobacco cage at the Sam's Club down on Eubank and Chico here in Albuquerque. And the tobacco cage was right next to a liquor display. And one of the bottles that was there was this one. And I looked at that, and I don't know how well it's going to show up. B-U-L-L-E-I-T. And I puzzled over it. And I finally just said, forget it, I'm just going to pronounce it the most natural way, Bulleit. Turns out that that is the correct pronunciation, although I didn't learn that for several years. So this is Bulleit bourbon. They call it Frontier whiskey. This, I believe this is distilled by Bulleit. Well, bottled by well, it says it is Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. That means they had to make it in Kentucky. It had to age in Kentucky. And the reason I was thinking on that and looking at the label is when Bulleit first started, they claimed to be using an old family recipe. Maybe they are. Tom Bulleit, who started this company, is descended from people who back in the 1800s, 1700s, whenever, did make whiskey, so they would have a recipe. But for a fair while, Bulleit got its juice from MGP, which is a huge distillery in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. You see distilled in Indiana, but it's not hard truth. You know, it's a Kentucky brand or a Texas brand or a Wisconsin brand, whatever, but it's distilled in Indiana. Almost certainly it comes from MGP, which stands for Midwestern Grain Products. Some people call it MGPI, Midwestern Grain Products Incorporated. But they make a ton of juice. Almost everything they make goes to somebody else. And that's where Bulleit was originally getting their juice. It's been a while since I had a bottle of Bulleit Rye, and they may still be getting their rye from Bulleit, I don't know. But this is Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, so by law it had to be made in Kentucky. It is a high rye mash bill. I don't know the mash bill offhand. I've mentioned before when I review on the video, or when I'm doing a sipping and talking, I don't bother to look that up. And I honestly can't remember, and I haven't gone back to check whether I've reviewed Bulleit bourbon on this channel before, so I'm going to just do a review tonight. But I can't remember what I was looking for on the back. Oh yeah, it doesn't give the mash bill. I don't see an age statement. Now, under U.S. law, if it's straight bourbon and there's no age statement, it's at least 4 years old. To be straight bourbon, it has to be 2 years old or more. to do without an age statement, it must be at least 4 years. So anywhere between 2 and 4, there has to be an age statement. It's straight bourbon, there's no age statement, therefore it is at least 4 years old. And I am going to, right in front of your eyes, conduct an experiment. I had intended to do this a good while back, and I plumb forgot. Well, it's not working. I have here a book. It's a, what volume is it? Volume 2 of Matthew Henry's Complete Commentary on the Bible. Well, that label is so low I just about need to have it, even though it's not really working the way I want it to. The book is right in the way. It elevates the bottle, so I'll kind of kick over there. It's inconvenient, but if I'm going to, as I've been doing, have the bottle on camera while I talk, where you can see the label instead of it cutting off wherever, then at least for this bottle I have to do it this way. Did you notice it's a thoroughly amateur production? If you didn't, I just feel sorry for you, because if you haven't noticed by now, you must be deaf, blind, and in another room from where it's playing. By the way, I got this bottle on the 14th of July. Here it is only the 26th, 7th or something of August, and it's already down halfway, which tells you I like this stuff. Now, it's 90 proof. It's a basic bourbon. It's nothing fancy. It doesn't make any claims to being the greatest greatest bourbon on earth. But I like it, and a lot of people do. Some people don't. Some people don't care, for one thing, for a high rye mash bill. But I like this stuff. On the nose, I'm getting something slightly smoky. There's a sweet fruitiness in there, citrus and maybe bananas. And I'll let you know right now, I find Bulleit to be a fruity whiskey. Maybe it's high barley too, because barley tends to give you some fruity notes. There's a tinge of honey. Caramel, I believe it is. It might be vanilla, but I believe it's caramel. And by the way, you ought to watch, if you're not already subscribed to Beautiful Bourbon with Casey Allen, please go do that. It's a great channel. Even if you don't agree with his palate, he's a funny guy. He's entertaining. And he pronounces it caramel. So he'll say, I'm getting caramel. Caramel, if you have a degree. Well, I'm a Southern boy. I never heard in my life anybody pronounce it caramel until I was an adult. It's caramel, and I'm getting that. There's some corn sweetness in there. And of course, all bourbon has to be at least 51% corn. So even in a barely legal bourbon, you're going to get some corn influence even if you can't detect it. Maybe some vanilla icing in there too. The mouthfeel isn't anything special, but it's a lot smoother. The mouthfeel, not the taste. I don't know what people mean when they say it's smooth. The only thing that about a bourbon that, or any whiskey, that communicates smoothness to me is the mouthfeel. The way it feels in your mouth, not the taste, the feeling of it. Sometimes it'll be creamy, sometimes buttery, sometimes silky. Sometimes the best description of the mouthfeel is smooth. And this is more than you might expect for a 90 proof bourbon. Now, one of the reasons anyway, distilleries sell 80 and 90 proof whiskey is they have to make back the money they spent making the whiskey. But in the barrel, it evaporates. If you put up a barrel with 50 gallons of whiskey in it, after 4 years, you might not have but 40 gallons in there. But those 40 gallons have to repay you the cost of the 50 that you originally put in the rickhouse. And so you temper it down with water from, 110, 120, 150, whatever the proof is in the barrel. You take all your barrels, you dump them, you batch them, you temper it down, and you expand the volume, which means you expand the number of bottles you get, which means you can more easily recoup your cost. But the process of proofing whiskey down, it doesn't just dilute the proof, it also dilutes the flavor. It's like if you just pour a glop of Coke syrup into a glass, and then you add water. Well, pretty soon, that glop, as water goes in, will fill the glass, but you won't have the concentration of flavor that you did when it was just the syrup, because the water dilutes the flavor. And so it is with whiskey. It dilutes the mouthfeel. As a general rule, there are exceptions. As a general rule, whiskey has a better mouthfeel the higher the proof. As you add water to proof it down to bottling strength, it tends to reduce the quality of the mouthfeel. So when I say this is not an exceptional mouthfeel, but it's better than you would expect from 90 proof, it's in that context. Now this is at room temperature. If you're going to drink it straight, what everybody these days calls neat, you want it at room temperature, neither cooler nor hotter. And hopefully your room temperature isn't 200 degrees. But at room temperature, I get a cool sensation. That's the predominant note I'm getting on the palate. Now there are others, but that one is so dominant, that coolness, as though there's cool spring water in it. It's so strong that I need to take another sip to get you other notes. There's brown sugar, there's butter, and most reviewers I find never get butter. I do fairly frequently. Brown sugar, butter, cinnamon, and the cinnamon especially is a typical bourbon note. I don't know the chemistry of it. For that, I send you over to Daniel Whittington at the Whiskey Vault, or Randy Sullivan at Bourbon Real Talk. How could I was thinking of everything except the right name of the channel. They have more scientific knowledge on this subject than I do, and they can tell you which chemicals, which compounds, how they work. But cinnamon, it comes out of the wood, and it's a typical bourbon note. Even at 90 proof, my right nostril is so sensitive to alcohol and to nothing else, I have to be careful when I'm nosing it. As soon as I swallowed, I got the alcohol burn. My tongue's a little sensitive tonight to alcohol. But underneath, as you might have noticed, I don't know, I don't do the visible Kentucky chew. I'd move it around in my mouth. I don't even swish it. I just move the whiskey around. Some people do actually literally chew the whiskey. I've never gotten anything from the Kentucky chew, so I don't do it. But as I move the whiskey around in my mouth, underneath everything else, I got oak. Not very strong, but oak. And I like oak in my whiskey. That's one of the problems for me with the few Irish and Scottish whiskeys I've had. They use barrels over and over and over. Most of what they use is used bourbon barrels, because under U.S. law, you can only use a barrel once to make bourbon. After that, you could put whiskey in it. You could re-char it even and put whiskey in it, but by law, you can't call that whiskey bourbon. And so a lot of our bourbon barrels, once they're empty, go to Scotland and Ireland, where they have what they call the first fill. It's the second fill, but they're filling it for the first time, and then after a few years they dump it, and they fill it again, and then they dump it, and they use the barrels until there's nothing more you can get at them, and they even a single malt, as the term is over there, is going to have a lot of different barrels blended into it, because this barrel over here, it's a first fill. It still has a lot of that char left. But this other barrel over here, this is the 10th time you've dumped it. There's nothing left there, and the whiskey's not going to have gotten much from it. So they're definitely blending even on the single malt. And for that matter, unless it's definitely a single barrel whiskey, everything you buy is a blend. And yet I have this thing about I really don't want a blend. That's a whole nother story. But I do get the oak there. Now, I've mentioned the cool spring water. I've mentioned brown sugar, butter, cinnamon. I said at the beginning this is a fruity whiskey, and I was getting it on the nose. But tonight on the palate, I'm really not getting anything except a low-level generalized fruitiness. And that's how drinking whiskey is. One night you'll get a ton of fruit, the next night you don't. One night you'll get 3 or 4 notes on the nose that you don't get the next night. There are so many variables that can affect your palate. And so that's why I don't do my full written reviews until at least the 3rd glass of a bottle. I've learned that if I review on the first glass, I might write a glowing review about something that from there on out I can't stand. Or I might write a poor review about something that opens up and I get to like. And tonight, it tastes good. Please don't misunderstand me. But it's not giving me the fruitiness that I expect from this whiskey. Except on the nose, where I'm still getting that citrus and maybe some banana. That time I got some fruit. And I'm getting fruit on the finish now that I'm focusing on the finish, because I haven't talked about that at all yet. But that time, while the whiskey was in my mouth, as I was moving it around, it came over the tip of my tongue, and I got a burst of, perhaps it was orange, maybe even mandarin orange, but all I can definitely say is that it was some kind of citrus. And sometimes that's how it works. Maybe you don't get what you usually get. Or maybe you get just that quick burst of it on one specific part of your tongue. But I do need to talk about the finish. On the finish, oak and cinnamon. Those are the first two things I get. Now I'm getting a generalized citrus note. It's kind of right back in here. And then the oak comes back. It's not oppressive. It's not too much oak. But I have that and a little spice, maybe red pepper coming in. And that'll, of course, be from the rye. It's not a long finish. It's fading now. But it's a pleasant finish. I like it. I like the nose. I like the taste. I like the finish on this, even tonight when I'm not getting what I normally get from Bulleit bourbon. This bottle was $28.99 at Kelly Liquors, and I trade mostly at two stores, Kelly Liquors in the Mountain Run Shopping Center and Total Wine over in Uptown. There are plenty of other liquor stores in town, but I'm not going back to Paradise Liquors on the west side. It's just too much for me anymore. I'm only 65, but for various reasons, driving where I'm not familiar with the roads is not good for me anymore. It really makes me nervous, so I'm not going back there. I like Jubilation Wine and Spirits down in Nob Hill, but it's such a pain to get in and out of, and their selection is even smaller than Kelly, which is smaller than Total Wine, that I don't know if I'll go back there. So I trade at those two stores. I occasionally go to Q Packaged Liquors. Used to be Quarters. Now it's just Q. And they have a really small whiskey selection, but they're the only place I know of in the Northeast Heights where I can get Balcones bourbon. And who knows how long that'll last. But I got this at Kelly, which is real handy. It's right by where I get gas. Even if I'm working an early enough shift, I can even stop in there on the way back to the house. It's right there. Good bourbon. So, this is a $29 bottle, 90 proof, high rye mash bill. So if you're not a fan of rye in your bourbon, you might want to steer clear of this if you've not yet tried it. But if you're new to whiskey, and you'll remember, that's the audience I'm aiming for. You know, if you've been drinking whiskey since before I was born and you like this channel, great, fine, I'm happy. You know, 57 subscribers and maybe even growing when I get one of these days. I'll take it. But if somebody told me when I started this channel, well, you're just filling a niche. Yeah, I know. It's a niche that I think needs filling. I can fill it. Amateur style, yeah. But if you're a beginner in whiskey, where are we? Beyond where I wanted to be. 25 minutes just about. If you're a beginner in whiskey, you're looking for something 80, 90 proof, you want to try a high rye mash bill, you want something that doesn't cost an arm and a leg, I recommend Bulleit. You know, if you can get a smaller bottle, a pint or even a shooter, that, go for that. When I'm trying something new, if I can, I like to get a smaller bottle. That way, if it turns out I hate the guts out of it, I'm not out so much money. But I do recommend this. Now, I can't call myself a beginner in whiskey anymore. I'm coming up on 4 years next month. Next month as I record. But I like it. It's a kind of a beginner's whiskey, but I like it. Move things out the way. Oopsie-da.